somewhere in the Chiltern Hills, 4 miles from the nearest road, accessible only by a single hidden driveway that does not appear on any public map, there is an estate that the British royal family has kept secret for over 80 years. No public record, no royal registry listing, no official acknowledgement of any kind. For 8 decades it was spoken of, if spoken of at all, only in the hushed tones of senior courtiers behind closed doors. Until the morning of February 3, 2026, when a 2-paragraph statement issued quietly by Buckingham Palace detonated like a depth charge beneath the most powerful family on earth and exposed the last and most brilliant move Queen Elizabeth II ever made. When we think of the British royal family, we think of Buckingham Palace, of Balmoral and Sandringham, of state banquets and silver carriages and the careful, centuries-old choreography of power on public display. We think of a family that is above all else visible. But Queen Elizabeth II understood something that very few people who surrounded her ever fully grasped. The most important moves are never the visible ones. For years, perhaps decades, the late Queen had been quietly arranging the board, drafting private covenants, sealing handwritten instructions, directing the movements of some of the oldest, most secretive, and most valuable private estates in the entire history of the monarchy. Not toward the institutions, not toward the Crown estate, toward one person. And when that arrangement was finally revealed on an otherwise unremarkable morning in February 2026, it set off a storm inside palace walls the likes of which staff had not witnessed in a generation. This is the story of Queen Elizabeth's final chess move, of the secret estate she protected for 80 years, of the ambitions she quietly dismantled, and of the extraordinary lengths she went to ensure that when her time came to leave the board, the right pieces were exactly where she needed them to be. To understand what happened on February 3, 2026, you must first go back 82 years to 1944, the deadliest phase of the Second World War, a year when the outcome of the conflict still hung in terrible, unresolved uncertainty, when the survival of the British monarchy, and with it centuries of history, was not a certainty but a prayer. It was in this climate, beneath the constant grinding anxiety of a world at war, that King George VI made a decision so quiet, so deliberately concealed, that it would not be publicly confirmed for over 8 decades. He purchased an estate nestled deep within the Chiltern Hills, straddling the ancient border between Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire, far from London, far from the press, far from every instrument of public record. King George VI acquired what would come to be known in the most restricted of royal circles as the Cedar Estate. No press coverage, no royal registry listing, no announcement in Parliament, no acknowledgement of any kind. The moment it was purchased, it was made to vanish. And vanish it did. For 80 years, when internal briefing notes were finally distributed to Royal Correspondence Guild members on the morning of February 3, 2026, even the most experienced royal historians paused in stunned silence at what those documents described, because the Cedar Estate was not merely a piece of land, it was a vault. Inside its private chapel, an engraved memorial crypt listing members of the royal family who served in wartime conflicts. Deep within its archive vaults, 180 oak trunks containing private wartime correspondence, royal communications never intended for public eyes, 72 previously undisclosed royal portraits, including oil paintings of Princess Margaret and King George VI, that no art historian had ever documented, and perhaps the most extraordinary discovery of all, 14 sealed audio recordings. Queen Elizabeth II speaking privately, candidly, unguardedly, with Winston Churchill, with Charles de Gaulle, with Ronald Reagan, with Nelson Mandela. An archaeologist who had spent decades working in the royal archives was asked to characterize what the cedar represented. This was not a historical museum, he said. This was the unrefined, unadulterated architecture of royal memory, a window into the innermost thoughts and feelings of the crown. For 80 years, the royal family had guarded this place with extraordinary care. The question, the one that had sat unanswered in hushed briefings and sealed documents for decades, was simply this: who would inherit it? The answer, when it finally came, was not the one that certain powerful people had spent years maneuvering to manufacture. Between 2017 and 2021, something was happening at the Cedar estate that the public knew nothing about. Prince William had been visiting, not as a ceremonial guest, not as a figurehead lending his image to a heritage cause, not in the company of photographers or advisors, or the usual carefully curated entourage of royal duty. Alone. During those visits, he walked through the cedar groves with Queen Elizabeth II by his side. He reviewed wartime correspondence. He personally catalogued naval messages. He refiled hundreds of letters from Second World War soldiers, letters untouched for decades. He repaired the moisture control systems in the archive chambers with his own hands. Let that image sit with you for a moment. The future King of England, on his hands and knees in a dust-covered archive vault, fixing humidity sensors, because the integrity of irreplaceable historical documents depended on it. This was not performance. This was not protocol. This was something the monarchy almost never displays in public and almost always undervalues in private. Conviction. Queen Elizabeth II noticed, and she wrote about it. Tucked within the Covenant Trust she had been quietly constructing was a handwritten note discovered only after her death, read only by those with clearance to access the Trust's inner documents. She wrote, "He will receive more than just the throne. The hush that kept it safe will pass to him." Those were not sentimental words. They were a declaration, a verdict delivered by the most legally precise and strategically minded monarch Britain had known in a century. She had watched him work. She had seen the quality of his stewardship, and she had decided, years before she signed the final documents, that the Cedar estate and everything it contained belonged with Prince William. What she built to ensure that decision was final, irrevocable, and legally unassailable is a masterwork of private legal architecture. It is called the Covenant Trust, and understanding it is essential, because without it, this story ends very differently. The Cedar estate is not part of the Crown estate. It does not fall under the jurisdiction of the Duchy of Cornwall. It is not governed by parliamentary oversight, institutional succession laws, or the normal framework by which royal properties pass between generations. It exists in an entirely separate legal world, deliberately constructed to be outside the reach of every institution that might otherwise claim a stake in it. In 2020, Queen Elizabeth II registered the private legal framework known as the Covenant Trust, filed under Charter :142, certified by a notary from the Royal Archives, a constitutional advisor, and the Queen's personal solicitor. It was built around two conditions, two specific, irreversible triggers. First, the moment Prince William was publicly acknowledged as the successor to institutional duty within the monarchy. Second, the conclusion of Queen Elizabeth II's state funeral. On September 19, 2022, the second condition was met. The first had already been satisfied, and on February 3, 2026, after the administrative process mandated by the Trust had run its quiet, deliberate course, Buckingham Palace issued its two-paragraph statement. Now that both requirements have been satisfied according to the rules of the Sealed Covenant Trust executed in 2020 by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, His Royal Highness Prince William, the Prince of Wales, will assume complete and sole care of the Cedar estate. Simple phrases, permanent effects. For most people who read that statement, it was the first time they had ever heard of the Cedar estate. That for two people inside the walls of the royal family, two people who would spend years quietly, patiently, and determinedly working toward a very different outcome, those two paragraphs were not news, they were a defeat. To understand what Queen Camilla and her son Tom Parker Bowles had been building toward, you need to understand how ambition works in royal circles. It doesn't announce itself, it arrives dressed as culture, as heritage, as a genuine, heartfelt desire to share history with the public. By late 2024, Queen Camilla had been quietly advocating internally for what she described as a Windsor Cultural Legacy Centre. Literary salons, culinary retreats, small group historical tours through cedar groves, gourmet getaways celebrating British heritage, on the surface admirable, thoughtful, even noble, but beneath that carefully curated surface, palace insiders had been watching something else take shape. When Tom Parker Bowles looked at the Cedar estate, he did not see history. He saw revenue. According to confidential documents reviewed by royal insiders, he had developed a comprehensive commercial proposal centered on a brand he had named Royal Wild, an artisanal food company, seasonal highland wines, wild fish, estate honey, cedar-aged cheeses, a Michelin-starred tasting menu within the estate's former hunting lodge, elite private events, exclusive memberships, a business enterprise clad entirely in the borrowed legitimacy of royal heritage. Then, on October 18, 2025, a briefing memo was leaked. It revealed that Tom Parker Bowles' legal team had been investigating whether sections of the Cedar estate could be reclassified under public heritage law, arguing that the estate's wartime origins warranted cultural preservation status. The implications would have been profound. Under heritage law, Prince William's exclusive claim would have been undermined. Collaborative management would have become legally possible. A foothold. 3 weeks before that memo surfaced, Camilla had hosted a private luncheon near Henley-on-Thames. The guest list was carefully chosen. The occasion framed as a celebration of rural sustainability, but accounts from multiple attendees told a different story. One guest described it with quiet precision as a trial balloon, a test run for a public-private stewardship model that would divide management of the Cedar estate between Camilla's foundation and external benefactors, reducing Prince William's role from sole inheritor to one voice among several. Prince William found out. His response was described as polite but immovable. He had no interest in collaborative management models, no interest in heritage reclassification arguments, no interest in proposals that reframed his grandmother's explicitly stated wishes as a starting point for negotiation. 3 weeks after that meeting, he activated the Covenant Trust. The door closed, and it closed permanently. The Cedar estate was not the only battlefield. On January 31, 2026, 3 days before the Buckingham Palace statement, a second, quieter transfer appeared in the land registry. Most people missed it entirely. Those who understood what they were looking at did not. North Hall is a 1,200-acre historic estate, rolling Berkshire hills, ancient woodland, 8 centuries of royal history embedded in its soil. During Queen Elizabeth II's reign, it had served as a venue for discreet diplomatic meetings, private hunting weekends, and the kind of quiet, off-record conversations that happen between powerful people who need to speak without witnesses. Conservative projections placed its licensing rights alone at over $48 million across a 10-year period. What made the North Hall transfer remarkable was not its value. It was its mechanism. A few weeks before her death, on September 8, 2022, Queen Elizabeth II made a legal designation so unusual that palace archivists described it as the first of its kind since Queen Victoria's Highland reallocation of 1872. Rather than allowing North Hall to pass through institutional succession, she reclassified it as a personal sovereign holding, private, hers personally, directed through her will, independently of every institutional framework that might otherwise claim jurisdiction. In Appendix R3 of the codicil, in her own hand, she wrote, "Let North Hall stay with the child who bears the burden of our future. Let it be a sanctuary rather than just a place to stay." Prince Charles. Now King Charles III was not consulted. Princess Anne was not informed. The decision had been made, quietly, precisely, by a woman who knew exactly what she was doing. 2 witnesses were present for the signing of the codicil. 2. On the sealed envelope containing the instruction, she wrote 5 words, "For the reign after me." When those 5 words were finally read within the family, when the North Hall transfer appeared without warning in the land registry, the ripples moved through the inner, royal circle the way one courtier described, like a stone dropped into still water at midnight, silent, and absolutely impossible to stop. Those who were present in the weeks following the announcements chose their words carefully. They didn't use the word angry, they reached for something colder. One courtier, speaking anonymously, offered the most precise description available: rage at a dead woman outflanking you. By late 2025, the campaign had been escalating beyond private luncheons and legal memos. Maurice Lyle, a longtime fixer with a reputation for navigating palace backchannel politics, had been quietly orchestrating a pressure campaign. Anonymous think pieces began appearing in print and online, arguing that the monarchy had overinvested in heritage assets and needed to rebalance its generational approach to major holdings. Unsigned, untraceable, but those familiar with the palace ecosystem recognized the fingerprints immediately. Tom Parker Bowles made one final attempt, submitting a lease inquiry on what he described as North Hall's southern orchard tract, characterizing it as undeveloped agricultural land with no connection to the estate's sovereign designation. The Duchy of Cornwall's legal staff rejected it without hesitation. When the full scope of what had been arranged finally became clear, when the legal walls around both estates proved not merely resistant but entirely impenetrable, Camilla's response was something those present struggled to categorize: not anger, not grief, something colder than both. The particular fury of a woman who had maneuvered carefully, patiently, and intelligently, and had still been outmaneuvered by someone who was no longer alive to argue with. Queen Elizabeth II had constructed her legal architecture with one crucial advantage over every plan her daughter-in-law had ever devised. She had started earlier, thought further ahead, and sealed every door before anyone else even knew there was a room to enter. In the middle of January 2026, Princess Anne was conducting a forensic review of her mother's personal letters in Windsor's Oak Room. Then she found something she hadn't expected, folded 3 times, enclosed in a leather folio, marked with initials she recognized instantly. Inside, a codicil unlike anything the family had ever seen. The Clarence Hill Estate, 4 miles from any major road, accessible only by a single private driveway tucked so deeply into the Chiltern Hills that it does not appear on commercial mapping systems. Originally acquired by King George VI in 1947, designed as an off-book reserve for the direct heirs of the sovereign, shielded from Parliament, exempt from public scrutiny, deliberately kept outside the flow of royal finances. Her instruction was written in her own hand: "I give my grandson Prince William the complete title and spirit of Clarence Hill, free from shadow or burden. Let it stay out of the Crown Estate unaffected by scandal or politics. This land is not a commodity. It is a covenant. Its purpose is to protect the moral line of succession." She used the phrase "immune to scandal" deliberately. By her final years, the Queen had grown acutely aware of the damage that public disputes within the family were causing to the monarchy's long-term standing. Prince Andrew's legal entanglements, Prince Harry's media campaigns, the slow erosion of public trust that each new headline accelerated. She could not control those stories, but she could control what happened to the land that would anchor the monarchy's future. She could ensure that the moral center of the institution, the quiet, stable, unassailable ground from which Prince William and Catherine would build the next chapter, was placed beyond the reach of any of it. Clarence Hill was not a gift, it was a shield. When you place the Cedar Estate beside North Hall, beside Clarence Hill, and you see what they are: a vault of national memory, a strategic agricultural holding, a moral sanctuary for the monarchy's future, you begin to understand what Queen Elizabeth II had actually been building. Not an inheritance, a foundation, piece by piece, over decades, in handwritten covenanters and sealed envelopes and private legal frameworks the press had never heard of, delivered finally on an ordinary Tuesday morning in February 2026, when the pieces landed exactly where she had always intended. As the dust settled, as palace statements were read and reread, as legal documents were analyzed, as the magnitude of what Queen Elizabeth II had constructed over years and decades became slowly, undeniably clear, one truth emerged that was impossible to argue with. What the world had just witnessed was not simply a royal inheritance dispute. It was a strategy. For years, the late Queen had watched the shifting tides inside the monarchy with the quiet, diagnostic precision of someone who understood exactly what was happening and exactly what it would cost if left unchecked. Ambitions rising, alliances forming, commercial interests dressing themselves in the borrowed language of heritage, power changing hands through private luncheons and leaked memos and carefully worded legal challenges that few people would ever see. She had watched all of it, and she had planned accordingly. The estates, the sealed letters, the handwritten covenanters, the delayed activation clauses. None of it was accidental. None of it was the improvised response of an aging monarch sorting out her affairs. It was a blueprint, drafted over years, refined, updated, executed with a precision that no legal challenge, no private luncheon, no back-channel pressure campaign had been able to touch. By placing the Cedar Estate, North Hall, and Clarence Hill in the hands of Prince William, through frameworks so carefully constructed they were impervious to every angle of attack, Queen Elizabeth II was doing something that went far beyond the transfer of land or wealth. She was securing the moral architecture of the monarchy's next chapter. She was ensuring that the institution she had given her entire life to would be anchored in its most vulnerable years by someone she had personally watched restore moisture control systems in a dusty archive vault and refile Second World War letters by hand, not because anyone told him to, but because he believed it mattered. Queen Elizabeth II reigned for 70 years. She outlasted 15 prime ministers. She witnessed the dissolution of an empire. She steered the monarchy through scandals, constitutional crises, and the relentless scrutiny of an era with no patience for quiet power. And in her final act, drafted in private, signed in secret, sealed in leather folios and covenant trust and codicils written in her own hand, she made her last and perhaps greatest move, not with a speech, not with a ceremony, with a piece of paper, a name, and a set of instructions so precisely constructed they could not be undone. Some people fight for their legacy loudly. Queen Elizabeth II simply outlasted everyone who might have taken it from her. And on February 3, 2026, her work was done. The monarchy has always been built on two things that rarely sit comfortably alongside one another: tradition and power. What Queen Elizabeth II understood, what she spent 70 years learning in the most consequential classroom on earth, was that the only way to protect one was to quietly, carefully, relentlessly wield the other. The estates she left behind are not just land. They are instructions, a message from a queen who trusted one person with her most guarded memories, her most cherished history, and the future of the institution she devoted her life to protecting. Now, with Catherine, Princess of Wales, standing beside the future king, the weight of that trust passes forward into a new era, carrying the cedar-scented memory of a grandmother who never once stopped playing the long game. But in the world of royalty, where tradition and power and secrets intertwine across centuries, one question still lingers in the shadows. Was this truly the final move Queen Elizabeth II ever made? Or did she leave something else behind, still sealed, still waiting, still hidden in a corridor that no one has yet thought to open? If this story stayed with you, if it made you see the quiet, extraordinary power of a woman who never wasted a single move, then you already know what to do. Subscribe to this channel for more cinematic journeys behind the closed doors of history's most powerful families. Stories that don't make the front page, but shape everything that does. Hit the like button and share this with someone who loves stories, where the most dangerous weapon in the room is a piece of paper. Because sometimes the greatest power isn't worn on a crown. It's written in a sealed envelope and left very deliberately for exactly the right person to find. We'll see you in the next one.